Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And as you can see, I've got up here 101 Sarmatians, which is a fantastic source book full of a whole bunch more setting material, stuff on the aristocracy, stuff on different areas of the setting of Baptism of Fire. So it's a source book for Baptism of Fire. It's got 101 different NPCs in it. It's got intrigue tables and tables for random events and tables for activities that the player characters can get involved in, especially interacting among the upper classes of Polish society at the time. And so be sure to check that out if you've already got Baptism of Fire. It will add some good material for you. Sword and Caravan, I just played this yesterday. I've been playing it for years now with the same party, and we're quite enjoying ourselves. It's a wonderful campaign. It's probably my best designed campaign book. It's got everything from the Third Crusade, from the start of the Third Crusade, all the way to the conquest of Genghis Khan, and it covers an area from like Accra to China, basically. So it's a huge amount of material, and as always, medieval authentic. Here's the Old School Companion 1, which has got a whole bunch of stuff that you could use. You could incorporate them into your own OSR game, or use it as part of one of my games like Lion and Dragon. But you can pick and choose what you like and give it a more medieval authentic flair. So all of these are very good examples of the sort of thing you could be combining with old Lamentations of the Flame Princess stuff, for example. So for those of you who don't know or who are confused by the title of this video, I'm going to talk about an incident that has occurred. James Raggi is the creator of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. And this was a very important RPG. It's a very significant RPG. It came out, I think originally, the earliest it came out at was like, was it 2007 or 2008 or something like that? This is not that edition, but anyways. And it was a game that changed the OSR in some ways, because up till that point, most of the stuff that was going on with the OSR was just kind of copying the existing rules. Like, you take the basic expert red box rule, you copy it, without breaking copyright, but you use all exactly the same rules. You don't change anything. So, and then you call it a name like Labyrinth Lord, right? And there you go. That is the clone of the basic expert rules, right? And same thing with all the various other ones, right? The original rules, copy it, you clone it, and it's called Swords and Wizardry. And that would let people play it. And most of the creativity, what amount of it there was, had to do with creating more modules and adventures, right? Which also most of the time stayed very close within the line and rule of the old school style, right? And it was finally Raggi that, because there were a lot of people, myself included, who saw the potential of the OSR to be able to do something more than just that, right? Like to take the rules of old school D&D and then adapt them into like a whole variety of much more interesting stuff, right? And he's the one that broke out, let's say, right? He came out with Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which is not based on any specific edition of D&D, but is based on old school D&D rules, right? And he made it into a gritty grindhouse sort of system to play. And he sets it in more or less real world Renaissance England, but he doesn't go into much detail about that he didn't go into much detail about that at the time. In fact, in the first edition, he still had like elves and dwarves and stuff like that. So it was by comparison to today, these rules are super tame, right? Like if you compare this to Baptism of Fire or Lion and Dragon, those two are much more radically different rules in terms of the distance from D&D than Lamentations. But Lamentations was really important because it was the first, because it did it really well. Like the changes he made worked for what he wanted the game to be, right? He started publishing. He started publishing other people too, and there are a whole bunch of incredibly good adventures that came out. So Jim Raggi is a top level, like, you know, very, has to be very respected as a rule designer, you know, as a like a system designer, as an adventure writer, and also as a publisher, right? He not only lives off of it, but he has been able to hire other people to do stuff for him, right? And has made some very incredible books all across the years. He has also, however, made a lot of enemies. His style, his grindhouse style, the kind of slight lasciviousness or the goriness has caused a lot of people at all areas to end up being critical of him. There are some people, you know, on the left that feel like some of his art and stuff is too salacious, right? And so they're opposed to him. There are people on the right that think that he's, you know, his stuff is too degenerate, right? And that they oppose him for that too, right? But of course, one of the biggest things that he's had as an issue is that he believes in writing what he wants, and so he's essentially by default a free speech guy, and that has gotten him into a ton of trouble with the left, which is what he identifies as, right? So he has a problem there. He has the problem of every white rhino, of every Bill Maher type, right? That they cannot understand that the paradigm has changed and that is not those people. They're using the terms that he grew up with, but they're not those people anymore, right? They've become something else. They've become monsters, right? So he's still desperate to believe that that's the cool kids club, you know. So he has made a lot of enemies over the years. There have been all kinds of people who have attacked him, harassed him, you know, attacked people around him, etc., etc. But I think that this weekend we have uncovered who is like the worst enemy that Jim Raggi ever had. And I feel like I'm in one of those old movies or something where, you know, those mystery movies, or like in Scooby-Doo or something, right? I get to the end and I'm like, let's find out who's caused all this trouble for Mr. Raggi. And I pull off the mask and, oh, it's Jim Raggi all along, you know, because Jim has also a bad habit of intentionally making his own life more complicated. And now he's done it on a major scale that has had a lot of repercussion on social media. You know, Jim often says some controversial things or does some controversial things. He also does things that are like uncomfortable for people, right? Like I know that there's some people on my live streams and stuff that make fun of my scarf. I swear to God that it's not an affectation. It's not something that I'm not wearing a costume. I dress like this normally. It's a normal way to dress for a middle-aged man of a certain class in Uruguay, right? It's not anything weird. In fact, all the clothes I have is like locally made, right? It's a normal outfit. But Jim, when he does videos, most of the time he'll take off his shirt. He's a portly dude, right? So it looks pretty awful, right? But he does this to shock people. He likes to shock people, but liking to shock people and running a really successful RPG business do not always go hand in hand. And I know that sounds weird coming from me, because of course I'm also a contentious figure. I'm also someone who fights with other people, you know, and who gets into these arguments. But he seems to not have as clear of a line. Like he doesn't see where, okay, if you go past this, you're going to really screw up, you know. And what's worse is he still seems to be in denial about like who his people are, right? Like who are the people that are actually buying Lamentations stuff? You know, I'll give you a hint. It's mostly not going to be people who voted Kamala, you know, like it's not. It just isn't. You know, the significant majority of people who are buying his old school RPG product full of violence and gore and occasional boobies, you know, not nearly as many as Vengers, but occasional, and other really creepy stuff, right? The people are going to be buying that are going to be old school gamers, right? They're not going to be the anti-WTO left, right? It's not Antifa isn't buying your products, Jim, right? So So even though I will sometimes say things that are controversial, my games, first of all, are not particularly controversial. There's very little political content in my stuff. There is a lot of interesting stuff in my stuff, but not anything that is like an overt modern day message that I'm trying to use as a political messaging. And second, I know who my audience are, right? And for the most part, I and my audience very much agree, right? So I would never do something that will probably alienate, let's say, half of my audience or more. Because that is what Jim Raggi just did. He's now, Jim Raggi's American, but he lives in Finland, and I guess for some reason he had to put on a shirt, get onto the plane, and go back to America for something or another. And he decided that the shirt that he was going to choose was one that I guess he says he made it himself, which features a drawing in a style not to a crude version of kind of the art that you see on a lot of the LotFP products. Of like Donald Trump in some kind of bondage position or something, something clearly humiliating, right? Like he's nude and whatever, and then in the back, it says Donald is a C word. I think that's what it said, but not C word. The full word. I'm just not going to say it because I don't know exactly what things YouTube wants to put on the no list, right? And then he took selfies of himself with it, and he showed it off. He was bragging, "How do you like my shirt?" All this sort of thing, right? I'm sorry, the old school movement, the OSR, like it or not, I'm not saying it's a conservative movement as such. I mean, it is in a sense of a socially conservative movement within RPGs, not politically speaking, right? But in terms of politics, it's not that everybody there is MAGA, right? Obviously, but it is something that by its nature has a large number of gamers in the OSR. A significant proportion of them are politically conservative, because the OSR is set up as a counterpoint and as a reaction to the kind of woke gaming that has taken over the major industry RPG products. It just is. That's just part of the OSR. Not everybody. I'm sure I'm going to get a whole bunch of people saying, "Oh, I'm a leftist and I like the OSR." Yeah, okay, that's fine. There are lots of people on the left too, but there's a larger block and a more significant block on the right in the OSR. And a lot of those people are MAGA people. And so if you decide that you're going to do something that's like really kind of in a very gross way, a humiliation of the sitting president of the United States, never mind the MAGA people, which I would bet that a very significant percentage of the people who buy Lamentations books are MAGA people. Maybe not even half, but somewhere around there probably. I would be surprised if it was any less than that anyway. But then there's also other Americans, right? And as you know, there's a whole bunch of other Americans, because remember now that there's only about 20% of Americans still identify as Democrats directly, right? So you're going to have like somewhere between 45 and 50% who are MAGA, who are Republicans, but Donald Trump Republicans on top of that. And then you're going to have a bunch of people, like that would be, let's say that was 50%. So then this would be another 30% of people who are not fanatical Republicans. They're not super fans of Donald Trump, but that they would probably, as Americans, feel, for the most part, disgusted or upset about someone showing off doing that kind of political theater. Because the only people who like that kind of political theater are like actual Democrat ultra-leftists with Trump derangement syndrome, which are about 20% of the population at this point. And most of those people are childless cat ladies who do not play RPGs. And they certainly would not like Raggi's books, So I think like that he may have done as much damage to himself or more than any of his own other enemies that have tried to cancel him, tried to block him, right? That's every time that happens, he gets sympathy from his audience. Here, he's attacked a part of his audience. He's done the same bullshit that are done by mainstream media, by mainstream producers and TV shows that decide, well, you know what? Oh, you guys really like this character. well, we're gonna kill him off and replace him with a LGBT person, right? Just because you deserve this, because you deserve us to make fun of you and to mock you and to not care about what you think about something and to actually kind of ruin the thing you love, right? That is the trait of the left, and it is in a way something that he's done here, right? Like he has put that out. He put that out in a context of him as a game designer, right? And it's just a spectacularly bad idea, right? I mean, it might cost him more sales. I have seen, but since this happened, it's about a day ago at the time of recording, there have been thousands of responses and tons of people who have been saying, I am never going to buy another Lamentations product again. To which my response, my first response is, well, if you're looking for an alternative, be sure to check out my incredible games. I like Trump. I wished him a happy birthday this past day, and and I'm not going to say something that's going to be demeaning to him or to the American system or anything else. I love, I'm not an American, but I love America and everything about it. So you can feel safe, and my games are full of like very good historical stuff and with like moral character of different sorts, right? Sword and Caravan, you can literally play the Crusades. You can be there with Richard Lionheart. That's how my original Sword and Caravan campaign began. The players were crusaders with Richard Lionheart going to fight in the Holy Land. In Baptism of Fire, you're playing heroic people bringing the light of God into a pagan realm. It's not. I'm not saying it's a religious product. Don't get me wrong. Neither of these are religious products. They're historical, authentic role play that incorporates mythology and magic as it was understood by the people at the time. Right? It's like this isn't D&D magic. It's magic the way people in the 13th century or the 11th century or whatever thought that magic was like, right? And I presented it that way. So it changes the rules. And of course, in terms of innovation, this is no fault on Lamentations, but Lamentations is now much older. And so my products like Sword and Caravan, like Baptism of Fire, like Lion and Dragon are more innovative in their adaptation. I'm not bragging as such, but because I've did this much later and I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So I'm also not telling you that you should boycott Raggi. I'm not saying that at all. Raggi's books are good books. His rules were good rules. I'm not gonna advocate for him to be canceled. That is the opposite of what I want here. I am saying that Jim himself is his own worst enemy. And I hope he finds a way around this, but I also totally understand why a whole bunch of people would be furious at him. I can totally see that. And I can't blame those people for being furious or not wanting to keep purchasing his stuff. And of course, I'm very happy to show up as an alternative, especially if you are a conservative Republican sort of gamer. In fact, the kind of games that I make that have a lot of elements of traditional virtues and moral conflict, right? Which isn't to say, it's just all good, black and white, right? Good and bad, right? Because I make up, there are a variety of perspectives, but it is true heroic role playing. Right? You're playing, it's heroic fantasy that you would be playing in my games, as opposed to in Lamentations, you're usually playing kind of roguish people who are not all that, the kind of more of a moral gray, right? But I'm definitely not telling people not to keep supporting Raggi if they want to. I'm not saying he should be canceled. I'm saying he's punished himself here, right? That's the only thing I'm really saying about this. And I really regret it because he is a super smart guy. And I don't understand. Like, I've spoken to him a lot. I've had him on interviews. We've interacted in many ways, and I just cannot understand how he can't get it through his head, right? It's just, he has this thing. He wanted to be in the Cool Kids Club. And in his mind, the Cool Kids Club was the left, right? It was the kind of activist left of, you know, any of us who are Gen X, we understand this, right? I was doing the Cool Kids Club thing when I was in my late teens and early 20s, right? And you know, I went to protests and shit and things like that, right? And they were much cooler back then than like any of the alternatives, right? Because they were actually fighting the man, as it were, right? You were fighting the World Trade Organization, for example, and stuff like that, right? And now, though, they're not. They're the establishment, and they're not what they used to be. They're not that thing anymore. They are now entirely conformist to the establishment. Their new message is, we will do what we are told, right, by these other people who are the experts and know the science, or that, you know, are the ones that are going to make sure that we don't commit some kind of triggering thing, you know. So like they have become the opposite of what they once were, and now the punk rock people are the right, you know. And as soon as the sooner you figure that out, the happier you're going to be, Raggi. I mean, I was lucky enough that because I guess I was never so much, let's say a left, like as in a Democrat. I was always a libertarian, right? I was a strong libertarian. And so I could see how that particular aspect was slipping away from the left as early as the early 2000s, right? Way before a lot of other people started seeing that. And I thought maybe it would readjust itself, but it didn't ultimately. And then I saw that instead what happened is that idea of freedom of speech, of freedom of expression, had become very deeply entrenched on the side of the right. Of course, there are people on the right I don't agree with, but that doesn't matter, because we both have the ability to argue in public amongst each other, right? Without the left sort of tactic of saying, no, if you disagree with me, the only thing we're going to do is censor you, you know? But for someone like Raggi, same thing with Zach, right? Which is who published with Raggi. They have this view of, oh no, but they're like we want the artsy hipster guys from the 90s, right? Because that's what was cool to us, right? And they were the ones that mattered, and so now we don't want to be conservatives, right? We want to be that thing, but that thing doesn't exist anymore. They're all gone. They're dead. It's over, right? The left isn't that now, and you trying to pursue that, they will never want you, right? Just like they won't ever want Zach because he did porn. They're never going to want you, Raggi, because you're a guy. You're not the right kind. You don't show the right kind of sensitivities. You're not willing to play ball. You're too brash. They will reject you, right? The people who would applaud your T-shirt until they realized it was you, and then they wouldn't anymore, are never ever going to be turned over to your side, and they will never be your customer base. Right? These are people that spend all their time talking about how horrible the OSR is, and how it's full of, like, you know, all these chuds and things like that are making terrible products that are offensive to women and don't represent minorities and all this sort of thing. Like, that's who you want. You can't do that anymore, man. And the fact that you have some notion that mocking the sitting president is going to win you points with them, and it's not going to cost you on your own side. That's a real issue, right? That's a real problem, man. So, I don't know. I'm there for you. You know, if you want to try to do an apology tour or something, let me know. I'll put you on the Pundit Encounter. But I'm also, I cannot blame anyone, Raggi, who is going to turn on you. Because you've turned on yourself, right? You've turned on your own best interests, you know. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you did this entirely intentionally because you literally just don't want anyone who likes Trump in the least to ever buy your product again. In which case, it might be mission accomplished here, right? I could understand that. You know, I say a lot in public, in social media, in support of Israel and in opposition to anti-Semitism, right? And I say that entirely knowing that I specifically do not want people who hate Jews to to buy my stuff. I don't want them there. I'm not interested in them as customers, because to me that is a despicable position for reasons that have to do with my family history, and my own ethics, right? And so I do that on purpose. I don't care, right? I want them to go fuck off somewhere else, right? To go and do their hateful bullshit somewhere else. So that's an example of an intentional case. But those are like, 5 losers, right? That are just hanging out, probably in the Bro SR, right? So they're hanging out with Jeff Rowe Johnson, and it won't really, like, it would be really unusual for any of those people to have bought my products in the first place. If they did, it was probably by accident, right? And it won't really cost me to see them go. They're a very tiny number of the people who buy my stuff. The people who buy my stuff. And a ton of them are MAGA people, right? But that's fine, because I guess I'm a MAGA person in as much as a non-American can possibly be one. I'm a great supporter, let's put it that way. And so, that is okay. But if I turn around and start saying bad things about Trump, then I wouldn't do that. And I know that you probably feel that's, to some way, sense that those are true for some reason, which I don't quite understand, because it seems to me like any intelligent person would realize that, like, your options about Trump are to say, well, okay, he's either, you can either think that he's doing a really good job for America, or you can think that he's doing an average job and has a lot of peccadillos, or you can think, well, you could argue that he's doing a substandard job. But there's no realm of normal people who aren't ill in the head, that are going to say, oh, he's the worst person in the world. That's just arrangement. It doesn't make any sense. So I do hope you get better, Raggi. I hope this doesn't cost you too much. But I'm not going to miss the opportunity to tell people, if you liked kind of like that historical aspect and the tight rules, right? Like the high level of risk and lethality that you have in Lamentations. Those are things that my Lion and Dragon system and Baptism of Fire system have as well, right? In fact, my original Lion and Dragon system was developed during a campaign that was called Dark Albion, of which I also have that campaign book, if you want to play the War of the Roses. And at the beginning of that Dark Albion campaign, it was a Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign. That's how much I like this system. That's how much I admire Raggi's work. Okay? And then I had to house rule it more to make it more medieval authentic. But in a way, Lion and Dragon and Baptism of Fire are, in a sense, descendants of the LotFP system. So you can check them out. And hopefully you'll find stuff that you like, with the kind of heroic aspects and virtue aspects that you might be more likely to enjoy in kind of these products than a lot of the real, like, moral abysses of some of the adventures. Not all of them. There are a lot of Lamentations adventures that are just normal, but there are some that are like literally you're walking into a moral abyss. So I guess that's everything for today. Again, not telling anyone to boycott. On the contrary, I can absolutely understand if you don't want to boycott, because his products are very good. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying they're quite nice, and you should consider it. But of course, if you feel that the offense is too strong for that, then know that I am here, and you can find the entire catalog. If you expand the description box of this video, you will see links to all of my products, and you can take a look, check them out at your leisure, and find out what you're going to like. Okay? I guess that's everything for today. Please share this video everywhere you think people will find it interesting or get pissed off about it. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. If this is the first video that's brought you to me, then let me know. And welcome aboard. And share it everywhere. Share the video, because it's really helpful that way. That's everything for today. Currently smoking. This is a Dunhill Shell Diplomat with Argento roots.